Hey guys, hang on a second. I know it's not Friday, but I want to come on here real quick because I thought this was an important topic to kind of go over. Hang on, I just want to make sure, see if I'm live. Yep, all right, I see myself. And all right, so hang on, let me move this over here. Let me do my PowerPoint. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. Oh, come on. There we go. So I'm actually going through. I have to go through a foreclosure, unfortunately, on an on one of my notes, and so excuse me. And I just back taxes weren't paid, and so I paid those, and then also the insurance wasn't paid, so I went ahead and added some forced place insurance on that. So I don't see anybody really talking about this, and I just thought it's very, very, very important. Oh, hang on a second. I am not. Hang on one momento. Let me go back to this screen. Hang on. Let me stretch this. Transform, fit screen. There we go. Transform, fit screen. There we go. All right. That's better. I'm looking on YouTube and also on TikTok, and the screen was a little janky. So I went ahead and I fixed that. So, like I said, I know this isn't for those of you who follow me. I do these 5 minute-ish Fridays every Friday at noon. I realize today is Monday, but I thought this was a very, very, very important topic to talk about. Um, Once again, I'm actually going. I have to do a foreclosure on a note that I own within my self-directed IRA. The taxes hadn't been paid, and then I had to put forced place insurance on the property. So these are things that people talk about buying notes, but they don't really talk about like the reserves that you should actually have. And it really goes to the same thing. If any type of real estate that you buy, you have to have reserves because you're going to be cash poor, where you're going to get into a situation where you do not have the money to actually see it all the way through completion, and more than likely you'll just have to give it away, or flip it to another investor and just I've seen cases where an investor actually paid another investor to take the property off their hands. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this. So this is I'm going to be calling these the investor quick hits, outside of the 5 minute-ish Fridays. And like I said, I know it's Monday, so I just want to go ahead and just spend a few minutes just talking about this topic. So why you need more money than you think in note investing, just real estate in general. So I am not a financial planner or a CPA. This video is for educational purposes only. Please consult a qualified professional for advice. This is just what I'm doing in my business. Just anytime anybody gives you any type of advice, please take it to an attorney, a CPA, or a financial planner, so that way they can, vet it and then apply it to your circumstance. Everybody's, goals are different. So just please take anything that anybody tells you related to note investing, real estate investing, or money, self-directed IRA. Just, always have somebody go over that with you. So with that, this quote, please, please, please take this to heart. Buying notes isn't just about the purchase price. You'll need extra cash. And like I was saying before, a lot of people, beginning note investors, they don't think that it's always like rainbows and unicorns, right? Especially with these performing notes. Performing notes do go non-performing. And if that's the case, you're going to have to pay for servicing costs. You're going to have to pay for an attorney. You're going to have to pay for BPOs, forced place insurance, and things like that. And then if it does go to foreclosure, you're going to have to pay somebody to go up and do a trash out for you, possibly secure it. So that there's other fees associated with it, just not the purchase price. So why extra money is needed? Loan boarding with servicer, collateral review and recording fees, legal costs, modifications, foreclosure, title updates, all of this costs money. And a lot of people, when they're talking about performing notes, buying performing notes, they do not talk about these costs. And like I said, I'm actually going through, I have to go through a foreclosure on a note within my self-directed IRA. And thank God I budget money for it because, I budget money on every one of my notes that I purchase. So that way, if something does happen, I've got that cash reserve to fall back on, right? So these things do cost money. If they don't, you're lucky. And then that's just extra profit in your pocket. So just, once again, just account for that. And I'll actually talk a little bit about this. Borrower workouts or property upkeep. So here's an example. You buy a $50,000 note for $35,000, purchase it for $35,000. You'll have servicing and collateral review between $1,000 to $1,500, BPO title. If you're a seasoned investor, you bought a lot of notes, you can go through the assignment of mortgages and the allonges and just make sure that everything from the start to where you're buying it, where everything lines up, and you can look at the deeds and everything. So as you get more experience with this, these costs will go down. But you just have to budget for this legal budget. If you have to do a foreclosure between $3,500 to $4,500, and I've had it go much higher, especially if they file bankruptcy. So all of this does come into play. So total needed in this particular example, you'll need between $39,500 to $41,000, just not the $35,000 to purchase this note. So cash buffer rule of thumb, please always keep between 10 to 20% of your purchase price in reserve. So if the note costs $35,000, keep an extra, just borrow an extra $3,500 to $7,000 on top of that, or just if you have $35,000, just back out $7,000 or something on that note, so that way you have a little bit of buffer when things do, not if, it's when they do go awry, and and they will. So just always, always, always budget that. Please, please, please do not touch this money. Say you borrowed to $7,000, or you borrowed in addition to $7,000 on top of that, 42,000. So out of that 42, take the 7,000, put that in a separate account that's just sitting there. Please do not touch that money, because when things do go awry, you actually have that money sitting there specifically budgeted for this note. So benefits of having a reserve: handle surprises without stress, keep deals moving forward, avoids fire sales like I was talking about before to raise cash, and it's attractive to private investors. Shows that you're prepared, and you're just not scrambling at the last minute. So common mistakes: spending all funds on the purchase price. I've seen this. I was initially, when I first started out rehabbing houses, I was guilty of this. Putting money in the Hip National Bank, borrowing a little bit more, and then putting that money in your pocket, to take a trip or something like that. Don't do that. Please do not do that. Just take that money, borrow a little extra, and then take that money, like I was saying, put that in a reserve, so that way, if things do go awry, you have the money budgeted specifically for this. Underestimating legal servicing fees, no reserve for property upkeep, and counting on the borrower to just pay. That, I'm telling you, if you're investing in real estate or real estate notes, please, 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 I beg you, budget your money, budget accordingly, and just don't assume that everything is going to go like clockwork, because it doesn't always go that way. So smart investors approach budgeting for purchase and reserves. Use the rule of thumb, 10 to 20%, and raise capital with transparency. So show real costs up front. So if you're borrowing money, if you wanted to borrow the $35,000, borrow the extra, say, instead of $7,000, like the 10 to 20, borrow an extra $5,000. 40,000, and tell and ask that, and just totally be transparent for the investor, for your private lender. Hey, the note is 35,000, but I'm going to borrow a little bit more just in case things do go awry. But your money's secured against that property because it's backed by real estate, right? So just be transparent if you are using private money. If you are using your own money, just once again, budget that extra money and just make sure you have that socked away somewhere and do not touch that. Do not spend it. So, like in investor confidence, when you plan for the unexpected, you look like a pro. So, key risks to know: borrowers stop paying, you'll work out or foreclosure, hidden taxes or title issues, check before you buy right, stay protected, and don't chase yield blindly. And like I was saying initially when I started this, I am in the process of having to do a foreclosure on an asset that I own in Michigan. And thank God, I had that money budgeted specifically when I buy pools and notes. I usually budget about 15 to 20% um, on these notes, so that way, I'm always accounting for if things go sideways, I have the money in reserves, and I'm not scrambling to raise money specifically for that asset. So just please be protected with this. And I think that's all I got with this. I don't know if there are any questions. Let me look. So if you have any questions about this, just you can drop them in the chat, or you can drop them in the comment section, either on like LinkedIn or YouTube or TikTok, and that way I'll see them. Or you can just send them to Larry at ljhinvestments.com, or call me 513-301-1468. Or you can just schedule a time with talkwithlarryhoffman.com. Here, let me do this back here. So you can just schedule a time with talkwithlarryhoffman.com. To just please always budget for the unexpected, because I'm telling you, it will happen. And when it does happen, it'll be nice if you have that money in reserve. So that way you're not, robbing Peter to pay Paul for this. So I'll be doing another case study. Well, this isn't really a case study, but I'll be doing a case study on this. Like I was saying initially when I first started, I'm in the process of starting the foreclosure on an asset, and had to pay taxes, and then I had to put forced place insurance on it, and then I was talking with an attorney to actually start the foreclosure process on this asset. So it's and what I did on this one is I budgeted 15% of what I actually bought it for. So that way, I had that money in reserve, just because past experience, and then past experiences with buying when I had rental properties. You have to have money in reserves, because things do happen and they will happen. So just be careful with that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to schedule a time, talkwithlarryhoffman.com, and I'll be more than happy to walk through any of this with you. Or if you just have any questions, just in real estate in general, just please feel free to schedule a time. All right, guys, that's all I got, and I just want to make sure I